The onset of the Great Depression of the 1930s brought a spike in suicides. Will Rogers noted of the time, when Wall Street took that tailspin, you had to stand in line to get a window to jump out of, and speculators were selling space for bodies in the East River. Winston Churchill, the day after Black Friday, observed, "Under my very window, a gentleman cast himself down 15 stories and was dashed to pieces, causing a wild commotion and the arrival of the fire brigade." Nearly 85 years later, the phenomena of banker suicides appears to have returned. The week of January 20th would be the last for Swiss REAG Communications Director Tim Dickinson, but wouldn't be the last in the string of deaths and suicides for international bankers. Just days after Dickinson's death on January 26th, police found former Deutsche Bank executive Bill Broeksmit in his South Kensington, London home after he'd hung himself. The next day, on January 27th, JP Morgan senior manager Gabriel McGee jumped 500 feet to his death from their central London headquarters. He was only 39 years old. A few days later, January 29th, chief economist for the Seattle-based Russell Investments, Mike Duker, was reported missing by friends. He was found later at the base of a 50-foot embankment. Police called it a suicide. February 4th, in a bizarre manner of death, the coroner ruled suicide for Richard Tolley, 57 years old. He founded American Title Services in Centennial, Colorado, and he had a total of 8 wounds to his body and head. The method of death, a nail gun. Last week, February 17th, Dennis Lee Junji jumped to his death shortly after lunch from the roof of the Asian headquarters for JP Morgan. He was only 33. In the last 8 months, there have been at least 12 reported deaths of bankers perishing under questionable circumstances. High-stress banking careers are being blamed for the recent suicides. However, the answer may not be that simple. Returning to the program via Skype from his New York office to give us insight into these deaths is Gerald Celente, the publisher of the Trans-Journal. And Gerald, thank you for sending us a copy. We're glad to have it. Gerald, I just ran down a short list of bankers whom have committed suicide or died under strange circumstances. Out of the gate, what is going on here?
Well, it's hard to speculate. You don't know what's going on in these people's personal lives, but the data is adding up to failure in a big way. People forget that as the new year began, the equity markets have dumped over $3 trillion in January. And then people also forget that there is a string of investigations going on that really don't make the news. People wonder, they speculate. They call it a conspiracy theory, that the markets are rigged. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. Look who these bankers are. You said it. They're international bankers. We know that there are investigations going on that the LIBOR rates were rigged. Now we're talking about $700 trillion worth of rigging. And you mentioned the list of international bankers, from Deutsche Bank to JP Morgan Chase.
A lot of these are coming from JP Morgan. What was, over the past 8 months, we're beginning to see these reports. Now suddenly it seems one after another. What was the significant event that triggered this, you think?
Again, these investigations. Look at the Forex markets. We're talking about what? About $5.3 trillion a day in currencies being traded. And when you look at where these people are coming from, these are the markets a lot of them were in. And then you look at other markets that are being rigged and that are under investigation, and you can put the pieces together. This comes from Jim Cramer, the guy that's on CNBC all the time. He's on Yahoo Ticker or Tick Taper or whatever it's called. And he said, quote, "The markets are rigged." So who knew what when is the question that keeps coming up in my mind.
So who are these investigating bodies? Who are the investigating bodies that are looking into these?
Oh, it's both coming out of Germany, it's coming out of Brussels, it's coming out of England, it's coming out of the U.S. These investigations are going on. As a matter of fact, there was a big story that just broke recently about the LIBOR rigging, where the United States and the UK have to get on board better because one's undercutting the other. These are real investigations. How far will they go? Who knows? When will they stop? Nobody knows. But here's the other fact. We know that all the crimes that have been committed by Wall Street, not one head has rolled. Not one. And again, this isn't a conspiracy theory because you look at the fines that were paid by the Goldman Sachs gang, the JP Morgan Chase criminals, the Deutsche Bank bandits. They pay the fines, but nobody's head rolls. And when the only heads that do roll are the low-level people within the organization.
And are these the people that are committing suicide?
They can very well be, because maybe they know too much. Because, let's face it, you don't rig LIBOR, you don't rig Forex, you don't rig the markets without the people at the top knowing about it. So what they're doing is they're cutting off the link that goes to the top. That's my best speculation. And again, I only could speculate by the facts that have been presented to us. Again, this is Jim Cramer, this guy that has a show on CNBC every weekday night saying, quote, the markets are rigged. So now the riggers may be getting off.
So do you think that obviously these are all bankers, and you mentioned the investigations. Do you think that there are other ties between these individuals?
You know, again, it's hard to speculate, but go back in the United States and listen to the round of minutes that were from the Federal Reserve back in 2008. Not the last round. They only released them, by the way, every 5 years. How about that for transparency? And you go back to the round that was released before this last one, and you see that Timothy Geithner, who became Treasury Secretary, when he was the head of the New York Fed, calling up the guy that's the head of Citibank and giving him a tip, according to the minutes, that they're going to be doing something with interest rates. So when you know that something's going to happen with interest rates and you're in the business of making money off that, is that an inside tip? When you have the president of the New York Fed calling the CEO of Citigroup and telling them that the Federal Reserve is about to make an interest rate announcement and gives them a hint of where it's going. So what I'm saying is there's collusion from the top. It's there. It's proven. So now, why are these guys jumping out of buildings or blowing their brains out? Do they know too much?
Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute, but what you just mentioned about the insider tips, is that legal activity?
The whole thing is a criminal operation. I mean, come on. Whether it's the financial end or going to war, it's a criminal operation. How many, I have to tell you, these bankers committing suicide, people are looking for, the smoking gun. They don't need another smoking gun. Look at the fines that have been levied against the banks since 2008. How much more proof is needed? Look at what I just said about Timothy Geithner telling the CEO of Citigroup down in Charlotte, South Carolina, or North Carolina, or whatever Carolina, that they're going to be adjusting interest rates. Is that a criminal activity? Is invading a foreign country under false pretenses a criminal activity? The gangs are in charge. When are people going to get it in their heads? They're murderers and they're thieves. They're the Bloods and the Crips, but people pretend to call them Democrats and Republicans. I don't say that facetiously. They both are murderers. How many more millions do they have to murder in false wars? How much more money do they have to steal from us to give to their buddies in the banking, financial, and corporate sector and call it too big to fail? When are people going to grow up? How much more information is needed? How much more data has to be piled on top of new data to show that they're crooks and murderers?
Well, I'll ask you this. You mentioned the media. In large part, we're seeing that these reports are coming from international news outlets. Has the U.S. media, NBC, CBS, ABC, been reporting on these suicides?
Barely. They're the prostitutes. They're bought and paid for by the D.C. drama queens, the Beltway jerks, and the Wall Street white shoe boys gang. Look who owns them. Look at the monopoly. Look who just had dinner with President Obama and French President Hollande. The senior vice president of Comcast, Cohen. Oh, Comcast is just now buying up Time Warner. They also just bought up a year ago NBC Universal. Only little kids could believe this garbage that we have a free press. We have prostitutes that get paid to do what they're supposed to do. Put out for DC and the Wall Street gang.
What's your take on the FCC program that would have made newsrooms required to report on how they select the news?
Why should anyone be surprised? Who from NSA is listening to us talk now? Who's watching what you do every time you get on the internet? Look at all of our Fourth Amendment rights have been robbed from us. Go to the airport, get felt up. How much more proof do Americans need to what's happened? Am I surprised? I want to make this really clear. And you don't have to be a wizard to figure it out. I hear people complaining, this Obama, he's a socialist, he's a Marxist. No, he's not. He's a fascist, just like the one before him and the one before him. And I don't say that as a throwaway line or to incite people to become angry and incensed. I say it as a fact. 4 words killed American capitalism and destroyed the nation. Too big to fail. The merger of state and corporate powers. It's fascism by definition. Not from me, from Mussolini, a guy that knew a thing or two about it. So when you say about the FCC, it's a fascist takeover. Look what the cops do to people, beating the hell out of them for jaywalking, like that little girl in Texas a week ago. She had her headphones on, and she couldn't hear the cops, these big tough guys, telling her she's jaywalking, so they throw her down to the ground, they put handcuffs on her and throw her into a car. Can't see people what's going on. So it's the FCC. What a surprise. They may have a camera in my bathroom. Look what's going on. And the people keep taking it. They keep arguing. Who's better, the Bloods or the Crips, the Democrats or Republicans?
In a frightening frequency, Gerald, let's go back to 2008. Did we see these kinds of suicides during the 2008 market crash?
No. No, we didn't.
So what's the difference then? What's the difference between 08 and now?
The difference between 08 and now is that in 08, people were still naive. They believed that it was the fundamentals of the economy became unsound. They did not know about all the dirty dealings behind that kept this thing going, so a lot was covered up. This is a very different story now. The investigations are going on. People realize that there's a cover-up. You haven't seen one head on Wall Street roll other than the low-level guys. And now these investigations are intensifying, particularly coming out of Europe. And possibly too many know too much about the real extent of the dirty deal.
And that's what I want to ask next, because people kill themselves when they feel there's absolutely no hope for the future. Did these bankers know something about the global economy that the rest of the world is in the dark on?
I don't think they know more about the global economy than the rest of the world is dark upon, but because most of the people that understand this, what's going on, understand the reality of it. My best speculation is they knew too much. And, you know, that's been a deal with the mafia forever.
So when you say they knew too much, like you mentioned the mafia, that really sounds like, okay, we're going to off this guy, we're going to put a hit on him, and we're going to take him out of the equation. Now, we're being told that these are suicides. Do you think that there's something else going on? That these are murders and not suicides?
Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Read my lips, no new taxes. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. I smoked, but I didn't inhale. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Why would anyone in their right mind believe one word coming out of the mouths of criminals, psychopaths, and sociopaths? We know nothing. It's a grand cover-up. As I said, it's a fascist takeover. They're only giving us the information that they want to give us, and when the Freedom of Information Act forces them to give us what they've been hiding, they redact the whole thing. Freedom of nothing. Gerald, this country is as free as Nazi Germany when you talk about the FCC being in the newsroom, when you talk about the NSA spying on us, when you talk about going into the airport and getting felt up and patted down.
So, Gerald, back to the suicides, animals have a sense of impending disaster. They're often seen fleeing areas where earthquakes are about to strike. Canaries were used to detect poisonous gases deep in mine shafts. When they died, the miner knew to get out. Should these suicides be seen in a similar light?
To an extent, we're looking at the decline of the world economy. They can't keep this thing going. Again, anyone with a half a brain and a little bit of interest only has to read the last releases that came out a week ago of the Federal Reserve minutes from 2008. And you can decide for yourself what a bunch of incompetent clowns are running the show. They didn't have a clue what was going on. As the worst of what was going on, the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, you can read her comments that she expected growth in 2008 at the level of 1.5%. You can read her comments, the person that's in charge now, of how wrong she was as we're hitting the worst of the worst yet to come.
So do you believe that these suicides are going to continue?
I believe that things are going to get much worse, and that for whatever reason, people losing their future, losing their present, being involved in schemes that they don't want to be caught for, people are going to kill themselves, whether it's in the banking system, the financial system, or a neighbor near you. When people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. To tie this right into, is this a grand conspiracy? I would say it's part of it, but I wouldn't say it's all of it. There are too many things going on in people's personal lives that somebody from the outside can't judge on.
I want to ask you about Mt. Gox and the disappearance of that massive Bitcoin exchange. What are your thoughts on that?
Pick up the Trends Journal that you have, the last edition. And there's a big story on Bitcoin. And we made it very clear that it wasn't one that we can see a future in, because the central banks and governments around the world are not going to let a currency surpass their fiat currency. The same reason why we believe that the federal central banks are driving down gold prices. And again, a conspiracy theory, as much of a conspiracy theory that they're rigging the LIBOR rate, they're rigging the Forex, and they're rigging the markets. So now you had a new competitor in here. It's not going to happen. The central banks are not going to allow competition. So it was no surprise to us. It's what we told Trends Journal subscribers to beware of, 4 months ago.
So, Gerald, what's your advice then to America, given these suicides and the way you see things forecasted?
I don't give advice. I only speak for myself. And I say, and again, we make forecasts, not advice. And our forecast is that the global economy is going to continue to deteriorate. The tapering is not going to work, and they're going to create a new round of stimulus. When they create that new round of stimulus, they'll call it something else. Just like they made up quantitative easing that no one ever heard about before. They'll make up a new line and a new lie. Oh, about going back again to the Federal Reserve minutes? Again, read them. Everybody should read them, as much of them as they can stomach. And you'll find out that the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States was dumping in about $600 billion into foreign banks. So like people say to me, you got the crash of 2010 wrong. Yeah, you're right, I did. I had no idea that the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States was dumping in trillions of dollars, which it ended up being amounting to, into the financial systems. So what I'm saying is that there is no other way out of this other than dumping more cheap dough into the system. When people realize what they're doing, you're going to see a spike in gold and silver prices. Already, the new year has begun 2 months into it with gold prices and silver prices steadily rising, because the people that invest in those markets understand the big lie going on, that the fundamentals of the economy are sound and that there's going to be growth in 2014. Whether it's the Chinese central bank, the European central bank, the United States central bank, they got to pump dough into the systems to keep the systems afloat.